Page 59, Module 7, Research Design and Ethics in Psychology. Research Design. Throughout this book, you will read about amazing psychological science discoveries. But how do we know fact from fiction? How do psychological scientists choose research methods and design their studies in ways that provide meaningful results? Understanding how research is done, how testable questions are developed and studied, is key to appreciating all of psychology. Table 7.1 compares the features of psychology's main research methods. In later modules, you will read about other research designs, including twin studies, Module 14, and cross-sectionals and longitudinal research, Module 51. In psychological research, no questions are off limits, except untestable or unethical ones. Does free will exist? Are people born evil? Is there an afterlife? Psychologists can't test those questions, but they can test whether free will beliefs, aggressive personalities, and a belief in life after death influence how people think, feel, and act. Having chosen their questions, psychologists then select the most appropriate research design: experimental, correlational, case study, naturalistic observation, twin study, longitudinal, or cross-sectional, and determine how to set it up most effectively. They consider how much money and time are available, ethical issues, and other limitations. For example, it wouldn't be ethical for a researcher studying child development to use the experimental method and randomly assign children to loving versus punishing homes. Next, psychological scientists decide on an operational definition, how to measure the behavior or mental process being studied. For example, researchers can measure aggressive behavior by measuring participants' willingness to blast a stranger with supposed intense noise. Researchers want to have confidence in their findings, so they carefully consider confounding variables, factors other than those being studied that may affect their interpretation of results. Psychological research is a creative adventure. Researchers design each study, measure target behaviors, interpret results, and learn more about the fascinating world of behavior and mental processes along the way. Understanding everyday behavior. When you see or hear about psychological research, do you ever wonder whether people's behavior in the lab will predict their behavior in everyday life? For example, does detecting the blink of a faint red light in a dark room say anything useful about flying a plane at night? Imagine that, after playing violent video games in the lab, teens become more willing to push buttons that they think electrically shock someone. Would this indicate that playing shooter games makes someone more likely to commit violence in everyday life? Before you answer, consider. The experimenter intends the laboratory environment to be a simplified reality, one that simulates and controls important features of everyday life. Just as a wind tunnel lets airplane designers recreate airflow forces under controlled conditions, a laboratory experiment lets psychologists recreate psychological forces under controlled conditions. An experiment's purpose is not to recreate the exact behaviors of everyday life, but to test the theoretical principles. In aggression studies, deciding whether to push a button that delivers a noise blast may not be the same as slapping someone in the face, but the principle is the same. It is the resulting principles, not the specific findings, that illuminate everyday behaviors. When psychologists apply laboratory research on aggression to actual violence, they are applying theoretical principles on aggressive behavior, principles they have refined through many experiments. Similarly, it is the principles of the visual system developed from experiments in artificial settings, such as looking at red lights in the dark, that researchers apply to more complex behaviors such as night flying. And many investigations show that the principles derived in the laboratory do typically generalize to the everyday world. The point to remember: psychological science focuses less on specific behaviors than on revealing general principles that help explain many behaviors. And remember, although psychological principles may help predict behaviors for groups of people, they more faintly predict behavior for an individual in any given situation. Knowing students' age may clue us to their average vocabulary level, but individual students' word power may vary. Psychology's research ethics. We have reflected on how a scientific approach can restrain biases. We have seen how case studies, naturalistic observations, and surveys help us describe behavior. We have also noted that correlational studies assess the association between two variables, showing how well one predicts another. We have examined the logic that underlies experiments, which use control conditions and random assignment of participants to isolate the effects of an independent variable on a dependent variable. Yet, even knowing this much, you may still be approaching psychology with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. So before we go any further, let's entertain some common questions about psychology's ethics and values. Protecting research participants. Many psychologists study non-human animals because they find them fascinating. They want to understand how different species learn, think, and behave. Psychologists also study animals to learn about people. We humans are not like animals. We are animals sharing a common biology. Animal experiments have therefore led to treatments for human diseases, insulin for diabetes, vaccines to prevent polio and rabies, transplants to replace defective organs. Humans are complex, but some of the same processes by which we learn are present in rats, monkeys, and even sea slugs. The simplicity of the sea slug's nervous system is precisely what makes it so revealing of the neutral mechanisms of learning. Sharing such similarities, should we not respect our animals' relatives? The animal protection movement protects the use of animals in psychological, biological, and medical research. We cannot defend our scientific work with animals on the basis of the similarities between them and ourselves, and then defend it morally on the basis of differences, noted Roger Ulrich, 1991. Out of this heated debate, two issues emerge. The basic one is whether it is right to place the well-being of humans above that of other animals. In experiments on stress and cancer, is it right that mice get tumors in the hope that people might not? Should some monkeys be exposed on an HIV-like virus in the search for an AIDS vaccine? Humans raise and slaughter 56 billion animals a year. Is our use and consumption of other animals as natural as the behavior of carnivorous hawks, cats, and whales? For those who give human life top priority, a second question emerges. What safeguards should protect the well-being of animals in research? One survey of animal researchers gave an answer. Some 98% supported government regulations protecting primates, dogs, and cats, and 74% also supported regulations providing for the humane care of rats and mice. Many professional associations and funding agencies already have such guidelines. British Psychological Society (BPS) guidelines call for housing animals under reasonably natural living conditions with companions for social animals. American Psychological Association (APA) guidelines state that researchers must provide humane care and healthful conditions and that testing should minimize discomfort. The European Parliament also mandates standards for animal care and housing. Most universities screen research proposals, often through an animal care ethics committee, and laboratories are regulated and inspected. Animals have themselves benefited from animal research. One Ohio team of research psychologists measured stress hormone levels in samples of millions of dogs brought each year to animal shelters. They devised handling and stroking methods to reduce stress and ease the dogs' transition to adoptive homes. Other studies have helped improve care and management in animals' natural habitats. By revealing our behavioral kinship with animals and the remarkable intelligence of chimpanzees, gorillas, and other animals, experiments have also led to increased empathy and protection for them. At its best, a psychology concerned for humans and sensitive to animals serves the welfare of both. Page 62. Studying and protecting humans. What about human participants? Does the image of white-coated scientists seeming to deliver electric shocks trouble you? Actually, most psychological studies are free of stress. Blinking lights, flashing words, and pleasant social interactions are more common. Moreover, psychology's experiments are mild compared with the stress and humiliation often inflicted in reality TV shows. In one episode of The Bachelor, a man dumped his new fiancée on camera at the producer's request for the woman who earlier had finished second. Occasionally, though, researchers do temporarily stress or deceive people, but only when they believe it is essential to a justifiable end, such as understanding and controlling violent behavior or studying mood swings. Some experiments won't work if participants know everything beforehand. Wanting to be helpful, the participants might try to confirm the researchers' predictions. The ethics codes of the APA and Britain's BPS urge researchers to 1. Obtain potential participants' informed consent to take part, 2. Protect participants from greater than usual harm and discomfort, 3. Keep information about individual participants confidential, and 4. Fully debrief people, explain the research afterward, including any temporary deception. As with non-human animals, most university ethics committees, sometimes called institutional review boards, also have guidelines that screen research proposals and safeguard human participants' well-being. Values in psychology. Values affect what we study, how we study it, and how we interpret results. Researchers' values influence their choice of research topics. Should we study worker productivity or worker morale? Sex discrimination or gender differences? Conformity or independence. Values can also color our observations and interpretations. Sometimes we see what we want or expect, even when the words we use to describe traits and tendencies can reflect our values. In psychology and in everyday speech, labels describe and labels evaluate. One person's rigidity is another's consistency. One person's undocumented worker is another's illegal alien. One person's faith is another's fanaticism. One country's enhanced interrogation become torture when practiced by an enemy. Our labeling someone as firm or stubborn, careful or picky, discreet or secretive reveals our own attitudes. Popular applications of psychology can also contain hidden values. If you deter to professional guidance about how to live, how to get along with parents, how to achieve self-fulfillment, how to respond to sexual feelings, how to succeed in school, you're accepting value-laden advice. A science of behavior and mental processes can help us reach our goals, but it cannot decide what those goals should be. If some people see psychology as merely common sense, others have a different concern, that it is becoming dangerously powerful. Might psychology be used to manipulate people? Knowledge, like all power, can be used for good or evil. Nuclear power has been used to light up cities and to demolish them. Persuasive power has been used to educate people and to deceive them. Although psychology does have the power to deceive, its purpose is to enlighten. Every day, psychologists explore ways to enhance learning, creativity, and compassion. Psychology speaks to many of our world's great problems: war, overpopulation, prejudice, family crisis, crime, all of which involve attitudes and behaviors. Psychology also speaks to our deepest longings for nourishment, for love, for happiness. Psychology cannot address all of life's great questions, but it speaks to some mighty important ones.